Many people out there have been speculating on that Meghan Markle has lied about her age. Is she actually older?
And there's a very big difference. It was deliberate.
Her childhood was with me. I got her through high school. I got her through college.
There was something, in my opinion, missing in their eyes. It didn't seem real to me.
What if one of the biggest royal stories we have been fed actually came from Meghan Markle herself and not the palace? Sounds wild, right? But stick with me because this gets deeper the more you actually look. For years, Samantha Markle has been dropping pieces of a story that most people brushed off without a second thought. Now, some are starting to wonder if those early whispers were dismissed way too quickly. According to Samantha, something about Meghan's public timeline just doesn't fully add up. While the media painted Meghan as a self-made Hollywood success, Samantha has been questioning whether things are as they seem. She didn't start off loud or dramatic. She was just pointing out small details that didn't quite click.
Quote Tom Bauer by saying, he said, look, we all laughed at Samantha and she was right. And everything she said has come.
Every birthday celebration, every milestone post, every polished photo shoot marking a new age. What if those numbers weren't quite so straightforward? This isn't just about some old family drama anymore. It is about timelines, dates, and details that raise more questions than answers, and that is where heads really start to turn. When Samantha first started bringing this up, a lot of people immediately dismissed her as bitter or just stirring up personal family drama. But over time, old photos, archived interviews, and public records have sparked fresh chatter online. Suddenly, people aren't brushing it off. They are actually looking closer. Now, to be absolutely clear, none of this is confirmed fact. This is part of an ongoing conversation, and people see it in very different ways. But it is gaining attention because these questions have been so consistent. When the same topic keeps coming up, curiosity naturally follows.
Tell you why. What she told the royal family, what she told Harry, wouldn't have jived, wouldn't have been consistent with the truth.
There's nothing original here.
I hope you're having the best birthday you've ever had. Thank you for everything.
Which is really such a...
Some observers have pointed out moments where old interviews, school timelines, or early life stories are pretty hard to line up. Again, that doesn't automatically mean something is wrong, but it does leave room for interpretation. In today's world, where everything is documented and analyzed, even tiny inconsistencies turn into massive talking points. It also raises a much bigger question about public image. When celebrities carefully shape how they are seen, how much of their story is transparent, and how much is tweaked for the spotlight. That isn't unique to Meghan. It applies to almost everyone in entertainment and public life.
When she was born, big new addition to the family, and we just have a very young sister here.
She said, I lost my father. We knew that she didn't lose our dad. She iced.
Still, Samantha remains consistent on one thing. She says her concerns come from personal memories that don't match what the public has been told. She recalls childhood moments that, in her view, don't align with the widely accepted version of events. For instance, there are childhood memories where Meghan was said to be a certain age, but the timing around them has raised questions for anyone watching closely. Again, these are interpretations, not confirmed claims, but they have definitely fueled ongoing discussions. What makes this so interesting is how public perception can shift over time. Someone once dismissed can suddenly be taken seriously when new conversations start lining up with what they said from day one. It doesn't mean everything is proven, but it does mean people are far more willing to listen now. In the end, this isn't just about one person or one claim. It is about how stories are told, how they evolve, and how the public reacts to new angles.
She delivered it like an actress delivered it.
But apparently for me, that doesn't...
In my opinion, she would still be a waitress if it wasn't for Dad.
Because once people start asking questions, even small ones, it can change how the entire narrative is viewed. And that's where things get complicated. When people began looking back at old family photos, some noticed details that didn't quite match the timeline everyone took for granted. In some pictures, Meghan appeared older than what official records and public details would suggest. That doesn't automatically prove anything, of course, but it definitely got people talking. Samantha's always said she wasn't trying to throw shade or stir up drama. From her perspective, she was simply connecting pieces that didn't seem to fit. While Meghan's public image grew brighter and more polished, Samantha's concerns got pushed to the background, but she still didn't back down. In her eyes, this wasn't about petty gossip. It was about details that simply didn't line up the way they should.
This is a copy of 17 magazine, and it was published in March of 1997. In it, it mentions our Megzy from Los Angeles and that she was 21 years old at the time of publication. That would make her birth year at around 1976.
She's described it like solving a puzzle. If the numbers don't match, something has to be off, right? And no matter how strong a public image is, questions don't just disappear. They sit there waiting for someone to look closer. That is precisely what Samantha wanted, just a closer look. When she eventually spoke out, it was not loud or aggressive. She simply asked everyone to stop and actually think. Her core argument was simple. If minor details feel off, it naturally casts doubt on the entire narrative. It was not an accusation, just a lingering question. That question slowly began to spread. Not with loud headlines, but as a quiet conversation that people simply could not shake. Once you start doubting one single thing, you begin seeing everything else in a completely different light. Then came another twist. Samantha was not the only family member looking closely at these inconsistencies. Thomas Markle, Meghan's father, soon stepped forward with his own perspective. It added a heavy new layer to the debate. To him, something was totally disconnected, something was not right.
Quiet about the birth, but mostly the pregnancy of these children. Everything has been shady. The one who's being...
Thomas did not start talking just to create a mystery. He was simply a father who spent decades documenting family life, birthdays, school plays, tiny milestones, the normal things parents capture without a second thought. He kept physical photos and vivid memories that felt completely real and familiar. Yet when Meghan's official history began hitting the press, those memories started to feel wrong. The public timeline seemed incredibly polished and clean, but that is exactly where his personal memories began to clash with the official version. He began pointing out key moments that simply did not fit the public record. He recalled major milestones happening on completely different dates than what was published. In the beginning, he actually doubted his own mind. Memory can play tricks on you. So he went back to the source, old photos, documents, and family keepsakes. To him, those dusty keepsakes told a story that did not line up with the narrative being shared worldwide. The gaps were not massive, but they were enough to raise questions. Some dismissed it as typical memory drift, but others felt those gaps deserved a closer look. That is where the mystery stands today.
When you're pregnant, there's not a pillow under your skirt, and there's live footage of her walking towards camera with her abdomen swaying left.
Thomas insists he remembers the big moments perfectly, her first job, early breaks, and major life milestones. When he compares those personal memories to the official biography, he sees gaps that are simply impossible to ignore. Of course, none of this is proven fact. It is all based on one man's perspective. What makes this so compelling is how these different family accounts begin to overlap. In the end, it is not just about a single date. It is about how two completely different versions of the same life can exist at once. Once those two realities fail to match, people naturally start asking questions. When Thomas first raised these discrepancies, the public reaction was incredibly harsh. Many people quickly dismissed his claims, suggesting he was just confused or mixing up his timelines. But from his perspective, this was not some random slip of memory. These were memories tied to major life milestones, the kind of moments that stick with a parent forever. He pointed to highly specific details, a graduation dress he bought, a birthday dinner that stood out, even the exact year written on a family Christmas card. These were not vague memories. They were tied to concrete dates and physical keepsakes. That was the moment he realized something deeper was not adding up. If the Meghan described in glamorous royal profiles did not match the girl he raised, it pointed to a much bigger question. Was the public buying into a carefully tailored version of her past? Not a total lie, perhaps just a history polished up for the spotlight.
You're going to listen to her. She has absolutely revealed and confirmed that Rachel Meghan Markle was never pregnant.
Then came the breakthrough. For years, critics argued there was no real proof, just family drama and bitter opinions. But then, a piece of physical evidence surfaced that changed the entire conversation. An old magazine from March 1997 began circulating online. It was an issue of 17 magazine featuring a young Meghan Markle. But the real shocker was not her photo, it was the age printed right next to her name. According to that published page, she was listed as 21 years old. Not 15, not 16, but 21. This was not a Photoshop rumor. It was printed, archived history, and that is exactly why this tiny detail exploded. If she was born in August 1981, she should have been a teenager in early 1997. She would have been in high school, not acting as an adult lifestyle model. Naturally, the internet went wild with questions. Some tried to dismiss it immediately. Maybe it was just a typo, or perhaps it was a completely different girl with the same name.
The doctor talks about both the children, and listen to what she says.
So you tell me to tell you something that maybe a dozen people actually know that's going to come out very soon. Okay. Meghan Markle, the reason why you watch her interviews and she just seems off, she's owned by a pharmaceutical company. The two children that she had, they're not hers. She didn't have them with Harry, and how her and Harry met.
Those were fair guesses. But others noted how perfectly every single detail matched up. The name, the face, the timing, it all aligned in a way that left everyone completely stunned. And just like that, what was once dismissed as wild speculation started looking different, not as absolute truth, but as something that at least deserved a second look. For Samantha, this moment finally validated what she had been shouting for years. What many brushed off as petty frustration suddenly looked more like genuine concern about details that did not match up. That magazine page quickly became a massive talking point. Online posts can be wiped or deleted, but print carries a whole different weight. It is permanent, archived, and unchanged, no matter how much time passes. Still, let's keep this in perspective. One clue doesn't rewrite the whole story, but it adds a massive layer to the conversation, and that is why it kept gaining steam. Right now, it feels like we are looking at two totally different versions of the exact same story. One is the official public timeline, clear, structured, and perfectly backed up by state records. The other is built on old memories, forgotten archives, and details that just do not seem to fit. The official story says Meghan Markle was born on August 4th, 1981. She went to school in Los Angeles, landed early acting gigs, and stepped onto the world stage in her 30s. On paper, it is a smooth, logical story. But then there is the other side, the version told by people who claim they were there, who remember things differently, and who insist some facts demand a closer look. Then there is the darker version of the tale, the one Samantha and Thomas Markle have kept repeating. Not the clean, glossy timeline printed in the tabloids, but a story that feels much more like a rough sketch. To them, Meghan was not just some teenager in the mid-90s. They claim she was already operating like an adult, entering spaces that did not fit her official age. And that is where the road splits completely. In one lane, everything matches up. The ages, the milestones, the big life events, all marching in a perfect straight line. But in the second lane, the dates shift just enough to make you pause. Not by a year or two, but by a gap that alters everything. Take the official story. Meghan is in her late 30s when she gives birth to Archie. But according to the critics, there are those who believe she was actually in her early 40s.
Because her age would also have an impact on her ability to have children. Because if Meghan Markle is 4 years older than what we have been led to believe, it makes it even more difficult to believe that she was able to get.
Now, that is no minor detail. It means a completely different stage of life altogether. It is like watching two entirely different scripts running side by side. One script is glossy, sanitized, and ready for prime time. The other feels raw, unedited, and highly messy. Naturally, it leaves everyone wondering which one is actually the truth. The official files are set in stone and widely accepted by the press. Yet, this alternative theory refuses to die, kept alive by old photos, family memories, and clues that do not fit the royal script. And that is where the rabbit hole goes even deeper. Because once you start picking at the dates, a massive question pops up. How does her royal pregnancy actually fit into either story? When the palace announced she was pregnant, it was framed as a flawless, joyful moment. The media went wild. Every photo was gorgeous, and the entire timeline seemed to run like clockwork. It felt like a modern fairy tale coming to life. But behind the scenes, some observers were watching from a very different angle. If she was actually older than the official bio claimed, she would have been pregnant at a much later stage in life. And that naturally breeds curiosity, not necessarily accusations, but basic questions. Biologically speaking, pregnancies in a woman's 40s usually mean intense medical monitoring and extra care. That is just common knowledge in the medical world. So when onlookers compared those medical realities to her highly public journey, they saw a pretty sharp contrast. The photos showed an incredibly easy, polished experience. Everything seemed effortless, high-end portraits, perfect timing, and a rapid bounce back. It was all heavily controlled and utterly picture perfect. To some, it was just smart PR and a desire for privacy. To others, it left a lot of loose ends dangling. Once again, it all comes down to perspective. But there were other odd details that only fed the rumor mill. The extreme secrecy around the birth, the lack of medical details, and the highly staged public appearances all kept the speculation burning. Now, we have to keep our feet on the ground here. None of these theories are actually proven. These are just public debates, not verified facts. But the fascinating part is how easily one question leads to the next. Once you find a crack in the timeline, you start questioning everything else. And once you go down that path, it is hard to turn back.
Never mind the hysterectomy stories that her family have told, but that would make it more difficult because that would make Meghan Markle near 50.
At that point, the debate stops being about mere dates and turns into something much bigger. It becomes a question of image, optics, and how narratives are crafted for the masses. Because when everything looks too clean, too perfectly staged, people naturally begin to wonder what is happening behind closed doors. It wasn't necessarily dramatic, just more human, more tangled, and way less polished than the official story. Then things shifted when details about the birth itself started getting real attention. A moment meant to feel warm and deeply personal ended up sparking more questions than anyone anticipated. In his memoir, Prince Harry painted a scene that sounded quiet, intimate, almost cinematic. Soft lights, calm energy, everything flowing without a single hitch. According to him, the whole thing felt almost like a beautifully directed film. He wrote about soothing music, a relaxed vibe, and Meghan staying incredibly strong and composed the entire time. The whole ordeal sounded effortless, as if every little piece just fell into place without a single issue. Then things shifted. When medical professionals read those words, some pointed out details that didn't quite line up with normal hospital protocols. These were not accusations, just curious observations that got people thinking. The hospital is famous for luxury maternity care, but even the best facilities must follow rigid medical guidelines. Take anesthesia after certain blocks. Patients are usually monitored very closely for quite a while. Recovery is rarely instant. It takes constant watchfulness to ensure a mother is completely stable. So when the book described a lightning-fast recovery and exit, people sat up and noticed. Doctors and nurses pointed out that normally you are supposed to rest and recover before moving around. That is standard protocol. Yet in the memoir, the timeline felt compressed. Meghan was apparently up and around, full of energy, and walking out the door shortly after. It sounded flawless, almost too perfect. And that is exactly why people started asking questions. Some wondered if the narrative was simply trimmed down to keep the story moving. Others questioned if they left out details just to keep things private. Both theories make sense, and honestly, neither has been proven. But when you map out the timeline minute by minute, it starts to feel incredibly tight. From active labor to recovery to walking out the door, everything happened in a tiny window. Naturally, that raised some major eyebrows among people who actually know hospital routines. Then you have the logistics. Slipping out of a highly secure central London hospital takes massive coordination, especially with security, transport, and standard medical checks. Throw in the immediate care a newborn baby needs, and it is a massive operation. When observers factored all that in, the timeline felt tighter than ever. Not completely impossible, but certainly unusual compared to the norm. Then there's the drive. Going from hospital to cottage takes time. Stack that on top of recovery, discharge paperwork, and newborn needs, and the timeline gets even more complicated. All of this sparked one massive question among royal watchers: why did everything happen so fast? Was it just about privacy and dodging the press, or was the story styled to focus on emotion rather than cold, hard facts? Even loyal fans of the couple have admitted the sequence of events feels rushed. Not to criticize them, but because it stands out so much against standard medical reality. And let's be fair here, this isn't proof of any actual wrongdoing. It's just a mix of personal memories, public rumors, and standard expectations around giving birth. But what keeps this alive is how one detail leads to another. When a timeline feels even slightly off, people start analyzing every single second to solve the mystery. Suddenly, it's no longer just a story, it's a puzzle. And when the pieces don't fit neatly on the first try, people naturally keep searching for what's missing. Some believe it was all for privacy, while others argue it was about controlling the narrative. Either way, the sheer polish of the whole presentation feels almost too perfect, like every detail was staged for the absolute maximum impact. That's the real catch. If the timeline of something as massive as a birth was tweaked or watered down, what other parts of their story were polished just for the spotlight? This isn't an accusation, but it's a question that keeps nagging at you when you look at the whole picture. Because, let us be honest, a flawless recovery makes for a great headline. It keeps the image flawless and avoids messy questions from the press. But in the real world, things are rarely that clean. Zooming out, this debate becomes about something much bigger than a single birth. This goes to the heart of how famous people craft their public brand. Reinvention is nothing new. Stars do it constantly. But with Meghan, some onlookers think this went way beyond a simple image refresh. Going from a working actress to a global royal icon was not just a slow transition, it felt deeply planned. Each interview, appearance, and public statement seemed to build another layer of a highly specific persona. It was polished, controlled, and perfectly consistent. In the entertainment industry, people call that kind of strategy image management. To be totally fair, almost every high-profile figure relies on it. But when everything lines up so perfectly, people start questioning what is natural and what is just clever staging. By the time she stepped into the royal spotlight, her public image was already complete. She came across as confident, totally poised, and ready for the world stage. But Samantha and Thomas remember a very different person, someone with flaws, struggles, and far more real-life edges. That major divide is what keeps this debate alive. It is no longer just about a single timeline. Instead, we have two clashing realities coexisting. One is the official, polished story backed up by the public record. The other is built on personal memories and old archives, raw and unpolished, but deeply real to those who lived it. Here is the catch. Once a narrative takes root globally, trying to change people's minds is almost impossible. We rarely question what we already believe. It is not out of stubbornness, but because the first version we hear gets so deeply locked in. That is why these opposing family stories stand out. They do not necessarily prove a conspiracy, but they shake up an established truth. They plant seeds of doubt in a narrative that once felt solid. Some see this as vital truth-seeking, while others call it useless gossip. Honestly, both of those reactions make sense. But when you stack the family stories, the odd timelines, the old magazine articles, and the birth drama together, an undeniable pattern begins to emerge. Still, it is not concrete proof, just enough to keep us talking. Ultimately, it is less about one specific claim and more about how public stories are crafted and guarded, especially in our hypervisual culture. When a specific story is repeated over and over, it naturally becomes the only version the public recognizes. Anything that contradicts it suddenly starts sounding like a wild conspiracy. Maybe this was never just about birth dates. Maybe it is about something far larger. How narratives get constructed, how public relations is managed, and how hard it is to separate truth from theater under the intense glare of global fame. Which brings us to the real question. After weighing all these conflicting accounts, what do you believe is actually going on? If this made you wonder, hit that like button and subscribe for more breakdowns. Check out the next video popping up right now. You honestly do not want to miss the shocking details we are covering next. Last time, things went completely off the rails. A British TV host went live, flashed unseen Soho House photos, and dropped a bombshell that left viewers absolutely stunned. That single broadcast did not just stir up drama, it completely flipped the script on Meghan's rise to fame. It ties right back to the mysteries we just covered. Do not skip this next part. Click that next video on your screen immediately. This next chapter pulls back even more secrets and raises massive questions that go far deeper than you think. Love these celebrity investigations? Subscribe and hit that like button. Stay locked in because our next breakdown is going to be wild.